In this video I'm going to show you how to create a previous and a next button in a user form in the Microsoft Excel using VBA. We will learn how to reference data directly from the dataset and move to the previous and next record. The first and last buttons display the first and last recording respectively. To begin, we created an employee database in Excel. We find various information such as name, address, telephone number, etc. Employee ID is used for unique identification. Save the file in XLSM format using Save As. Excel Macro-Enabled Workbook .xlsm is a file extension used by Excel which allows you to save Excel documents with macros and VBA code. Before you start coding, you'll need to open the VBA editor. To do this, head to the Developer tab and click the Visual Basic button. You can also open the VBA editor with the shortcut key Alt F11. To insert a new user form, click on the Insert User Form button in the toolbar. Now, add controls to user form with the toolbox, select a label, then, click on the user form, in the place where you want to add the control. This results in the created control having its default size. In the same way, add a text box in front of each label. The form that we want to create includes the different fields from our database. We use text box controls to display the fields of a record. Also add a text box to search for an employee using their ID. Now add buttons. When the user clicks a button, your VBA application usually performs an action. For this first button, which will launch the VBA code to search for a record, modify its caption and its name from the Properties window. Similarly, add 4 buttons and modify their caption and name from the Properties window. The previous button, the next button, the first button, the last button. Once you've added a control to a user form, you can easily move or resize it. You generally do this with the mouse. Now, edit the caption of each label. The names we will use are the same as the column names in the Excel table. You can modify the properties of several objects at the same time. To do this, select all objects whose ownership you want to change before running the process. Here, we modify the font of the labels. At this point we modify the name property of the text boxes. The names we choose in this example will be used later in the VBA code. You must therefore respect this appointment. Let's call this first text box TXT Search. Let's call the text box for employee ID Control 0. The text box name for employee name is Control 1. The text box name for phone is Control 2. The text box name for address is Control 3. The text box name for job position is Control 4. The text box name for department is Control 5. Finally, the text box name for work email is Control 6. You notice here that the names of these text boxes always start with the string control. This string is concatenated to a number. For the first column of the table the number is 0, the second is 1, etc. until the last column, which is 6. Let's start by coding the search button, which allows you to search for an employee based on their ID. Double-click the search button. The VBE adds instructions for opening and closing a macro triggered by the click event of the search button. First, declare 2 variables, findRow and crow. Execution errors occur when an instruction attempts to perform an invalid operation. each execution error causes macros to stop. The application has an error handler to take into account this type of inconvenience. It is the onError instruction which validates error handling. OnError goToError handler must be placed just after the variable declaration, or at least before the first procedural line that could cause an error. Now get the value of txtSearch and assign it to the crow variable. Next, find the row with the data. The key to using VBA to find matches in cells is range.find, a method that searches the range and finds what you're looking for, with plenty of options. The range.find method is a method that acts on a range object. Therefore, you must know which part of which sheets and workbook you want to target. Use an entire column, column A. Since the return value is either nothing or a range object, it will be a cell, and we usually want to access properties of the object. It makes sense to set the output to an object, like this. When you use the VBA range.find function, you provide the function with parameters, the syntax of which is shown below. The only required parameter is what you are looking for. The rest of the parameters enable you to narrow down your search based on the criteria set in the parameters. What? The thing you're looking for. This accepts strings but also numbers. Look in, search the values, Excel values. Once the employee ID is found, add the values to the user form. OnError goToZero disables any enabled error handler in the current procedure and clears the error object, which is not cleared by exiting the procedure where the error occurred. Error handler must be placed at the end of the procedure, possibly preceded by the exit sub instruction. Here we use the VBA messagebox function which displays a message to the user and the string entered in the search field does not exist in the employee ID column. Let's test this code. Now let's write the code for the previous button. First, declare the variables. Next, write the error block. OnError resume next tells VBA to skip lines of code containing errors and proceed to the next line. Next step, find the row containing the data and move up one row. In this text box named Control 0, we display the employee ID value. So, get this value and then assign it to the crow variable. Now use the range.find method to find this ID in column A. The offset property is the one that you will use the most with range to move around the sheet. It is the very important property that allows you to move right, left, up and down and to extend the size of the selection. To move up one row, set the row offset parameter to -1 and the column offset parameter to 0. Now if findRow.value is equal to the value of A1, then we are in the column names row. So use the exit sub statement to immediately exit the sub procedure in which it appears. Otherwise, add the values to the user form with a loop. To move within a column while remaining on the same row, set the offset arguments as follows: row offset equal to 0 and column offset equal to 1. Insert OnError goToZero to restore VBA's default error handling. Let's test this code. This time, let's code the next button. The code for the next button is almost the same code as the previous button with some modifications. So copy this code and paste it into the next button subprocedure. The first change to make is to the offset property settings, so set the row offset parameter to 1 and keep the column offset parameter to 0. This allows you to go down one row while staying in the same column. The second change to make is to replace sheet1.range, A1.value with an empty string. So if findRow.value equals empty, then we are in the first empty row right after the last record in the table. And that's why we need to use exit sub. Let's test this code. The next step is to code the first button. This button displays the first recording. First, declare the findRow variable. Then, add error block. Next, the findRow variable takes the value of cell A2. We now use a loop to add the values from row 2, this is the first record, to the user form. These lines of code are already written in the previous procedures. So just copy them. Let's test this code. Finally, let's code the last button. This button displays the last recording. So we need to know the last line. To do this, define an LR variable as long. Then assign the last used line number to this variable. The last row is found by searching in column 1 from the bottom of the worksheet upwards. Declare a variable named findRow. The findRow variable takes the value of the last non-empty cell in column A. All that remains is to use a loop to add the values from the last non-empty line to the user form. Let's test this code. Thank you for watching.